pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any changes, Sean, to the agenda?
No, Commissioner.
Roll call, please.
Chairman Saylor, Vice Chairman Jacobs, Commissioner Helmar,
Here.
Commissioner Pruitt,
Here.
Commissioner Stoppenbrink.
Here. Public comments, there's nobody in the audience. So, consent calendar, so we need approval of the minutes. We have a quorum, Sean, for the minutes to approve them.
Yes, you just need 3.
Would you mind,
Oh, make sure your mic's on.
yeah, Mike, please.
Oops, sorry about that. So, the acting chair will entertain a motion for accepting the minutes.
I motion to approve.
We have a
I
second.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carried. Public hearings. With no public hearing, discussion items. We will have the discussion on the proposed changes to the ordinances with respect to smoking establishments and hotels and motels. So Sean, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioners. Tonight is just a discussion item based on a future agenda item that was requested by the City Council to look at definitions and distance requirements for specifically for smoking establishments, and then at a latter meeting there was a request about hotels and motels. So we're going to continue. We figured we would just address both questions in both discussion items tonight, and then we would bring back a draft ordinance at a subsequent meeting. So the council basically directed staff to work with the commission to establish distance requirements for smoke shops and then hotels and motels from sensitive receptors such as schools, parks, and residential uses. Staff conducted some research to assist with the discussion in determining a reasonable distance required for smoke shops and hotels and motels from sensitive uses. In addition, staff was able to gather different definitions for smoking establishments to differentiate from the typical retail uses, which our planning and zoning code identifies them as. So as of right now, smoking establishments or smoke shops are not defined independently. They're basically just something else that sells retail goods. So in looking at the establishment to follow before developing a formal ordinance, staff is looking to establish the following before developing a formal ordinance, and one is the definition of a smoke shop. The city has a definition and regulations for smoking establishments, like a tobacco bar. In the attached document that I provided in the report, there are several different definitions for smoke shops. Based on research and examples, the theme tends to lead towards defining it as a facility, building, structure where a certain percentage of floor area or display area is devoted to tobacco products, paraphernalia, or both. And then also we need to look at establishing prohibited locations for these establishments to locate. Tobacco bars in our current code shall not be located within 300 feet of any residential district, any educational, religious, or cultural institution. However, since smoke shops currently fall under retail, there's no distance requirements for sensitive uses such as residential uses or districts, educational, religious, or cultural institutions. In staff's research, 1,000 feet seemed to be standard distance. However, upon discussion, we can kind of come up with a recommended distance for these types of facilities if the commission so feels is necessary. And so in reviewing the information that we received from various cities, we kind of put together at least a recommended language, or at least something to start the discussion and basically encourage feedback from the commission in terms of any changes. But due to kind of the trend that we saw, that we would basically create a definition for what we call a smoke shop, which means an establishment selling smoking, drug, or any traditional or electronic tobacco paraphernalia or products where 15% or more of the total floor area or shelf area is devoted to selling tobacco products. Limited sales of tobacco products that commonly occur within convenience stores or service stations are not included in the definition. Smoking shall be prohibited within all smoke shops unless the establishments are formally permitted to operate a tobacco bar under applicable state and local laws. And then the distance requirement would be 1,000 feet from any public, private school and 300 feet from any residential zone district. In terms of hotels, motels, we really didn't get a lot of information regarding hotels and motels in terms of separation from sensitive uses, because typically they kind of act quasi as residential uses. They don't typically emit more sound than, maybe a multifamily development. And so we didn't see a lot of distance requirements. We saw more, which is what we have, is, extended setbacks, building height restrictions based on how close or how tall the building is. So an extended setback, if the building's 40 foot high, it has to be set back a certain amount of feet per foot above like 20, right? So instead of a typical 5 foot setback, it may be 20 feet because of the height of the building. So we have some exhibits actually in our zoning code that kind of show that delineation on stepping that building back or pushing it completely back to maintain that setback. And then also incorporation of block walls, those types of like limited access to those areas, locations of trash enclosures. And then basically the next steps would be to kind of discuss these items, kind of get some recommendations. I would go back and put together an ordinance that we can then go through the review process, the approval process, and then take that then to the council for formal approval as it goes through that zoning text amendment process. So with that, acting chairman.
So Sean, something kind of dawned on me. We have currently ordinances, don't we, for alcohol, liquor stores, things of that. Don't we have that already in place?
I don't think there's any distance requirements for those. I would have to double
Just a
check.
zoning requirement, but not a distance requirement.
I think there's distance requirements for schools, but other than that, I think that's it. And it's only for like liquor stores. So like a restaurant that would serve alcohol is not necessarily subject to the same requirements as like a liquor store that is predominantly focused on selling liquor. And I can look up to see, I don't think it has a percentage, but it might, of kind of similar concept where it's a certain amount of floor area that's dedicated towards liquor sales. I think it has to do with where it's, because liquor store is predominantly in the business of selling beer, wine, and spirits, where a grocery store may have a large liquor area, but it's not predominantly in the business of selling liquor. So I think those are the terms that it uses in our code, where it says that its primary focus is liquor or spirits or beer, where it differentiates supermarkets and full service restaurants and of those sorts.
So this could fall into a similar thing as a liquor store with respect to a smoke shop, so you could have some similarities, but just a different type of a business, right?
Oh, you mean using the similar terminology,
Yeah,
you
that's
mean
what
for
I'm
smoke
thinking. I mean-
shops, instead of using like a certain percentage?
Yeah, so if you took your liquor store ordinance, to the extent you have one, and substituted this terminology, would it work?
We can definitely look at that and see how
I don't
that.
know if I would save a little bit of time and effort. I don't know if I'm trying to cut it short, at the harm of having the ordinance, but it was just something crossed my mind is all. Any commissioners, you have any comments or
To
thoughts?
me, it's like, why, it would seem appropriate to, if we're gonna go here, to treat a smoke shop, comparable to a liquor store. I mean, they're the same kind of thing.
The same type of vice.
Well, I was trying to avoid using the word vice, but yeah, you're right. And I kind of like consistency, so there's not like, well, why are we treating this one this way and this one a slightly different way?
Yeah.
What's the moral thought behind that? So I like your idea of making them comparable.
Yeah, what I have a question about is, To me, when I think of smoke shop, I'm thinking something tobacco, something hookah related, something like that. But in here, it says selling smoking, drug, and or traditional. And the inclusion of drug, is that a general one that also includes cannabis?
It wouldn't, and that may be just a little, we can always remove that. I think that was probably based on one of the other ordinances, that definitions, and it may have just been an oversight to add the word drug in there.
Yeah, because I think that,
But there are
Because-
certain types of paraphernalia that are sold for illicit drugs beyond cannabis
right,
that are sold in these smoke shops.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
And that would cover it just in case. Like, I mean, granted, it's not illegal to sell paraphernalia for any type of drug, from my understanding. I could ask the police chief, but if you have paraphernalia for, like, I guess you would call it a crack pipe or whatever it is, I mean, you use the
Yeah.
same. I don't engage in any of that, so I wouldn't know exactly if it's differentiated from what you would use for legal cannabis compared to another type of illegal substance.
right. And I think the way it's in here and the fact that it is so far in that sentence from the word paraphernalia, it leads to some ambiguity about whether or not it's general drug paraphernalia, or if it's drugs that could include
And
cannabis.
that could be removed probably easily in that definition and just not utilize that, because we don't want to cross over because the city has gone the direction of cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
We want to make sure that this is not contradictory to them selling. But although it still could, if you want to engage, because basically the smoke shop can still sell paraphernalia that would accommodate legal cannabis, right? Pipes, bongs, papers, those types of things. So they sell that stuff. So the question is, do we basically eliminate that as part of it? Now, I did look up for liquor stores, and it says liquor stores and other off-sale establishments dedicated to more than 25% of the sale floor to sales of alcoholic beverages for off-premise consumption, but excluding full-service grocery stores. And then basically shows that they need to be they can't be within 500 feet of an educational, religious, or cultural institution or public park.
So Sean, how did we did the smoke shop several years ago? What was the regulations and distance requirements?
There was nothing, because there was nothing in effect at the time. There
just
is
commercially
nothing now.
zoned and-
It's treated as general retail.
Okay.
The only reason why there was a conditional use permit on that particular smoke shop was because of the hookah lounge, the smoking tobacco smoke. What was the term I used? But the tobacco bar
Yeah.
is what it fell under. So then that required a conditional use permit for the ventilation, the independent areas. I think they may have operated it for a very short period of time. I don't think it's still continuing to operate.
The smoke shop's still there, but they're not doing the hookah lounge.
I don't think the hookah lounge is still operable there. So, but that was what triggered the special permit, in the distance requirement.
Okay.
When I read the other cities' definitions and this one, when it came to drugs, in my mind, I just thought that meant cannabis.
In the most part, it probably is, because I don't think,
But if we're excluding cannabis from this ordinance because we have our own special regulations for them, then maybe.
you want to use the word drug, maybe use paraphernalia. So if they have cannabis paraphernalia, it still qualifies as part of the floor ratio of the smoke shop.
I just
Yeah.
assumed that it would, for example, in my mind, it included the one on the corner, High Times, but I didn't think that it would include cookies because they're,
Their consumption
their
lounge.
consumption lounge, that would be covered by its own thing, right?
And I think that we're just defining specifically, I think we can really easily differentiate what a smoke shop is and what a cannabis retail shop is, or a consumption lounge, because they have to have a state license. It's very explicit in our code that anything cannabis related has to have a conditional use permit. So we're really trying to define what a smoke shop is, and for the most part, I think a definition, we can pretty much hone in on what that is. And especially like with liquor stores, it's 25% of floor area of the floor dedicated for alcohol sales. Where could you use that for a smoke shop, or do we use less than that?
Well, I would argue for consistency. I don't have a problem with 25%.
I don't,
Because really, you're differentiating what's a convenience store to what's a place that's basically acting as a smoke shop,
Right.
right? And so, if the definition captures most of the product they sell, because I guess I don't frequent either one of the smoke shops, so I'm not quite sure. Like looking at what products they have, they do operate similar to a convenience store. They're going to have sodas, they're going to have energy drinks, they're going to have other particular items there, but I know they've got a lot of paraphernalia there too. So
We have 2 smoke shops in Coalinga.
one on Polk and then one downtown here.
That was one.
And then there is that cigarette shop, but I don't know if they're still operating in the shopping center by the old Save Mart.
That's been closed for a while, I thought.
yeah.
And then the liquor store was 500 feet?
For yes, 500 feet from any educational, religious, or cultural institution or public park.
Okay. I would also then suggest that if we have 500 for the liquor stores, we would have 500 for the smoke shops.
Okay, and then in addition, it says the 500-foot separation requirement does not apply in the downtown overlay, which is basically, when you look at the map, it's the big square. That's kind of the downtown overlay.
Right. So that
So
would,
Sunset to Washington to Forest, no.
Well, and we don't
To
really
Elm
have
to
any,
Fit.
thing down there that would be conflicting anyway with that 500, 4,000 foot, do we? Are there any, schools or churches or anything?
The park. I don't know how far the park is from the smoke shop on Polk, and I do not know. And if it says excludes the downtown, then the smoke shop wouldn't be affected by the downtown,
Right.
Because it's in the downtown overlay. The one on Polk Street is not within the downtown, so it would be subject to the 500. There is a church probably a block away, I think, right there by next to the gas station.
Oh, yeah.
But wouldn't it be grandfathered in?
It would. I mean, it wouldn't be something that we would go and shut down because of it. I think it's just really, we're establishing a regulation to affect any new smoke shop.
How would it affect the smoke shop on Polk should they decide to sell?
Well, if they close, it falls under the legal they would basically become legal non-conforming. So it would essentially be, if they're non-operational for 6 months, they lose their, I guess
Exemption or whatever.
they lose their legal non-conforming status.
But if they were to not close, stay open and sell to someone else, would
As
that?
long as they remain open as that use, as long as the
Okay.
use stays open, yeah.
Okay,
Usually, like with the transfer of ownership, even with our ABC licenses, I think, when there's a continuation, I think I missed it here. Hold on a second. Because typically, if it changes ownership, we typically will let them continue to operate. Oh, sale or transfer. So no conditional use permit. We require conditional use permits for alcohol establishments. So that's another question, whether there's a recommendation back to the council. The council didn't recommend wanting to put any special permits on them. They just want to they just want to make sure they have a separation requirement.
Yeah.
So, I think with smoke shops, because it's more primarily retail, you don't have, I know liquor stores, but obviously the reason why the exemption on they exempt, it's mostly the bars that they really want to make sure they address, because there's on-site consumption. There could be noise issues, other things for the purpose of the CUP. But I think for a smoke shop, since there's no on-site consumption, they're pretty much buying and leaving. It's not really something that you're going to be able to condition further beyond anybody else going buying any other product. And it already has some regulations in here for liquor stores about loitering and those types of things, like, no litter, for some reason, no payphones.
And of course, this would This would also require the current regulations with respect to parking spots based on square footage and things like that.
Yeah, typically, like in the downtown area, if they're relocating, if it's retail in nature, office in nature, it's really hard to try to permit more, especially with the downtown parking lot. There's a lot of we have exemptions in our code, so depending on where it's located, yes, we do look at that. But typically, if it's a replacement of a use, unless it's a new build, we don't usually, unless it's going to be something that has a big, intense change in use, where parking would become an issue, we usually analyze that when we just approve a business license. But if it's just a replacement of an office building from another office use to another office use, we typically we're not going to look at that in particular. If it's in the downtown, they usually, there's the exemptions that if they're within a half mile of public parking, that helps, they can reduce the parking standard, which is our downtown parking lot.
Yeah, my initial question was, have there been any problems with the smoke shops? I mean, what prompted the city council to want,
I honestly don't know.
okay.
This was brought up as a future agenda item from one of the council members, so I don't know if they've had problems at these locations. If there's been complaints, I don't know all the details. I don't have all that information.
Okay, I would be interested in why they wanted to do this. I mean, if there's not a problem, why fix it?
Yeah.
I mean, what is there to fix? But,
Yeah.
it's, I think I would be comfortable with as long as we would just treat it the same way as we would a liquor store. Then, yeah.
I'm with Michelle on that. The only thing is, just like you, as I was reading through all of that, I was trying to figure out if we were blurring the line between tobacco and paraphernalia retail and the cannabis one. So it's going to be important that as that goes forward, that's very intentionally looked at to see if it's going to be misinterpreted by anyone. Not that I'm saying you're going anywhere, but like these things are going to be on the books, and even though we have an understanding, make sure that it's very clean about that separation between the two, since we do have both.
Yeah, I think the definition, I mean, minus the term drug, I mean, I think that would be able to pretty well define the difference between, because you're not mentioning cannabis products or cannabis, but it could be any, drug paraphernalia for sure that would be incorporated in a smoke shop. Now, because the cannabis use is a completely different use, they're permitted to have, paraphernalia there to sell and everything else too, because they're normal retail, but they fall under a completely different land use definition.
But the retail may have like CBD beverages and CBD things that have no THC in them. So
That would be whether or not you incorporate that into it. CBDs aren't illegal. They're able to be sold at grocery stores.
Right.
So I would say that if someone opened up like just a CBD store with just CBDs, is it going to fall under retail? Most likely.
Okay.
We don't have a definition that would regulate that specifically, unless you want to regulate that, unless the council wants to regulate that specifically. I think it's really geared towards tobacco products, and
Would
drug paraphernalia.
Would CBD, exclusively CBD products at a smoke shop, count towards the floor space?
Based on the definition, I don't think it would.
Okay.
Because from what I read here, in a lot of these definitions, I didn't see anything that talked about specifically CBDs.
Can't you vape CBDs?
You can vape CBD, there's
So would that would-
beverages, there's,
Right, but would vaping it, put it into the smoke shop arena or not?
Well, it depends on whether you define it. I mean, I think if you look at most of the it's mostly related to tobacco,
Okay.
like cigars, cigarettes. I don't know. I don't think the CBDs would fall, like if they had CBD oils or topicals, those types of things. I don't think those would fall under it, unless you so choose. But it's not really it's not even constituted as a drug.
Right.
So I don't think that I didn't see anything in there that really talked about CBDs. It more had to do with tobacco specifically.
But if you put anything about like vaping tobacco or something like that sort of related vaping in there, then it's gonna, unless it's a real clean definition,
Yeah,
that
that's what I'm
CBD
concerned about.
inclusion, yeah.
Yeah, but you're not. But the vaping is more of the paraphernalia, the pens, those types of
It's
things.
the method of delivery.
Not the cartridge or whatever you use.
I'm not even
think
familiar
we're-
enough to
see,
know if they even
I
have
think we're-
CBD.
Well,
I
'cause
don't
see,
think they
people
vape
talking about
CBDs.
this.
Cause
Yeah.
see, I have friends who do like these, I don't know, something, there's like flavors, I don't know. It's not CBD, it's not, I don't know what it is. Anyway,
You're gonna do it?
it's nothing illegal, it's something that, it's nothing that was ever considered illegal either. And so I could see, that being part of the smoke shop tobacco sort of percentage. And then if next to it you have a CBD cartridge that's going into a vape pen,
Then you could use that because there are multiple things that can be vaped, from THC, CBDs, nicotine, and all the other chemicals that
Yeah.
what flavored chemicals. So it really depends on whether you want to include that or not.
I just wanted to be clear what it is we are
Yeah.
including and what we're not.
yeah, same here.
And I don't know that CBD is something that we want to particularly target.
Yeah. I don't,
I mean, yeah.
So if you, in actuality, if you had a pen and if you had a cartridge and it was CBD, then it wouldn't be something that would be dedicated to the percentage. But if you have a pen or any kind of instrument for delivering it, then that would fall under paraphernalia, and that would fall under your category because it can deliver any of those products,
but
not
then
just
if,
CBD.
You know
Yeah.
what I really liked? I liked I think it was just one city that had, it wasn't amount of space or percentage of the space. It tied it to percentage of sales or something. Which seemed to me, I don't know that if that would be more complicated to
Yeah.
have to calculate every year.
It is because
Okay.
then and that's one of the challenges even with, when we collect percentage of sales, even for our cannabis industry, is, making sure that they're providing us the right information and the right gross receipts where, unless you audit them, you can't really confirm that they're being honest in terms of what because they may say, oh, well, I only sold X amount of
Okay.
revenue. I think that, and I saw that one in there, and that was one that's the first thing I think of is the difficulty in enforcing and holding them accountable for it. Where if you have a footprint, they required when they submit a business license, hey, provide us your footprint of sales, then we can occasionally go by, and if we have to check it, we can say, hey, well, you've added a lot more floor space for all this, and you're well over the whatever percentage we decide to recommend.
Okay, cancel that thought then.
So commissioners, any other comments, thoughts? This is a non-action item, correct, Sean?
It is, but we do need some staff does need, I say staff is like, it's more than just myself, but I just need direction in terms of what you want to develop into the ordinance.
I think that you've heard the comments from all of us, and from that information, can you draft something then or do you need more,
Well, I need to know whether if we're gonna include CBD products or no, or we're just looking at like paraphernalia.
I'd say paraphernalia and tobacco products.
Okay, and that's pretty much that's a lot, the sum of a lot of these is really just the paraphernalia. So based on the definition that I kind of drafted, now the question is, are you good with 15% or do you want to go to 25%?
I would say go to 25% to make it consistent with alcohol.
I would concur with that, 25%.
Same here.
And I would go with the 500 feet, like alcohol too.
Yeah, this is drafted to include 300 feet, but I think 500 feet would be,
Well, it's 500 from any public, private school. Okay, question, the alcohol one says, education, religious building, park, or cultural unit. What here in town is considered a cultural unit?
I think a while ago, like a cultural institution, I think was like your kind of arts or maybe like the Imaginarium. I think at one point, I think that would qualify. I can look at the definitions though. Let me see if I.
Yeah,
Because
that
I was
makes
about
sense.
to ask about like an Imaginarium sort of thing, or like
It's really where
they,
it's more geared towards like maybe where children are congregating. 'Cause, you know, a lot of times you have like child care centers that fall under sensitive uses in some instances. I think cultural institution would be more like a maybe a dance studio. Let me look and see if I've got a definition. I don't know if I have a definition for
Because I
that.
know a couple of the cities, Citrus Heights in particular, was very specific.
But they may have a definition. We may not have one. So if we don't have one, we may not want to use that term.
Right. They were, and many of them included libraries.
We do have a cultural institution. So it's a public or private institution engaged primarily in the display or preservation of objects of interest in the arts or sciences that are open to the public on a regular basis. This classification includes performing arts centers for theater, dance, and events, buildings of an educational, charitable, or philanthropic nature, libraries, museums, historical sites, aquariums, art galleries, zoos, and
Yeah.
botanical
got
gardens.
the Baker
there's the
Museum,
museum.
got West Hills
So-
College, and
That's what I was thinking. I was trying to enumerate
they
our
got the
cultural,
theater out there, and they've, yeah,
was.
Baker Museum.
And I wondered if the library was included. in
library.
It says libraries.
that. Okay. Yeah, okay.
but those are both in the downtown overlay, so wouldn't
Right.
be,
If we use that same term in terms of the downtown overlay, if you restrict it, or if you don't want to restrict it. But if you want to use the similar language, I can use that language and then we can put together. And, you know, this does, according to the council, it doesn't have to happen overnight. We can bring this back. I can bring a draft to the commission. We can look at it, and then we can always come back with another subsequent meeting and actually, because I don't want to post public hearing notices and do all that process when we don't have an agreed upon ordinance. So,
agree.
I mean, if we're, and really a lot of it is figuring out percentage, the distance requirements, and then any kind of additional definitions or what sensitive receptors we want to keep that distance at. So, because I've got 500 feet that you guys had kind of agreed on.
Yeah,
Do you want to include cultural institutions for, I mean, that's a pretty big list, but it depends, I mean, and based on where they're at, I don't know what kind of, you may put it to the point where you can't put them anywhere in town.
yeah.
If you use that definition.
But I noticed that here, it's also 300 feet from any residential zone district, but there's no such restriction for liquor stores.
That's actually in the, I think, that's for, okay, so the 300 feet is for tobacco bars. That's the definition in the tobacco bars,
Okay,
is the 300 feet. So when you look at, I think in, where I put definition of a smoke shop in an establishment permitted locations, tobacco bars shall not be located within 300 feet of any residential district, any educational, religious, or cultural institution.
you know, I think
that the
I'd
same
leave
for a bar?
cultural institutions in there, Sean. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think that we're gonna buff up
Okay.
against that,
yeah.
but,
Okay, so we got, so use the same thing as tobacco bars then?
yes.
So residential, do you want to just keep the same 500 feet from residential? Educational, religious, and cultural institutions? So
I
use the
would.
same definition as tobacco bars? For the actual sensitive uses?
Tobacco bar, yes, not the smoke shop, right? Is that it? We're making that 500 feet?
Well, there's nothing for smoke shops because they fall under retail. So right now, there's no distance requirement for smoke shops. Tobacco bars are the only things that are regulated related to tobacco products.
So how far does a bar have to be from a residential district?
I think it's 500. Or residential district? I don't think it specifies residential district.
Any residential zone, okay, then why are we specifying it for a tobacco bar?
It's up to you guys.
I would just say.
You guys want to stay consistent with alcohol sales, you can do that.
To me, I don't see any difference to treat it any differently.
Okay.
And
So
I'm wa-
liquor stores are no residential is mentioned in liquor stores.
Okay, so to me, the smoke shop should be like a liquor store. The tobacco bar should be like a alcohol bar. If there's no residential restriction for an alcohol bar, I don't think there should be one for a tobacco bar.
And going to the verbiage about the downtown overlay exemption, would that override the distance and make them be able to go near the school, the high school?
Still, it would have to be if they're outside of the downtown overlay,
Well,
or if
let's
they're
say-
inside the downtown
Let's
overlay,
say we
but
put
within
them
within 500 feet.
within the downtown overlay. On the side where the high school is, would that negate the 500 feet from that school?
Let's see. That's a good question. So it says the 500-foot separation requirement does not apply in the downtown overlay district. So
So what would be the closest one of those establishments
I would say that I would-
could get to the high school? 'Cause
I would
that's
say that I
probably-
would probably still, I would say if it doesn't apply in the downtown, but I don't know if that means that whether the school's in the downtown district as well, or whether if you're in the downtown district, then as long as the 500-foot doesn't apply. So you could be on the outskirt, or right on the edge of the 500, right on the edge of the downtown overlay, it would not apply.
Cause like, is Rico's part of the downtown overlay? 'Cause you
No,
said
he's outside
Sunset
of
and
it.
Washington.
It's outside of it.
Okay.
He's on the northwest side of Sunset, so he's not within the downtown.
Okay.
Okay, but is there any property along there that could be, because I would wanna keep it away from the
Yeah.
high school.
Yeah, you got that mixed-use property there on Washington where the hotel was proposed,
Right, but that was
which I think is what triggered
right,
Yeah.
distance
yeah.
requirements for hotels.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I think that, but I think we'll discuss that next, and I'll kind of give you my 2 cents on that, and how a project like that would not necessarily have to go at all in the future, at least in those areas where you're by in neighborhoods like that. But we can talk about that. But it says that it basically doesn't apply in the downtown overlay district. So if you located yourself in the downtown overlay, the distance requirement doesn't apply. So yes, if you were right there on the edge, inside the downtown overlay, if you're within 100 or 400 feet, that distance requirement would not prohibit them from locating there.
Well, could we just not include that exemption?
For smoke shops?
The downtown overlay.
For the, yeah, for
Just have the
anything.
feet.
Yeah, I can make the change and then advise the council that was a recommendation by the commission to remove that exemption.
I mean, not that it's likely, but I mean, if I understand
It
it
could.
correctly now, you could put like a bar in right across from the high school or something, if it's still within the downtown overlay. Under
Yeah, but there's no property over there that would be,
Yeah, we're talking about liquor stores. We're not talking about bars. Bars are completely different. So bars can pretty much be proposed anywhere. They just require a conditional use permit. Liquor stores have specific requirements to define liquor stores. And I'd have to look if there is a separate
Cause the liquor
land use
store,
class, because liquor stores, I think, are a separate land use classification from, so you have bars, nightclubs, and lounges, conditional use permit for all of them, right? But then you also have, I think, let me see if we've got retail sales. So they're gonna fall under retail sales, but there's gonna be, I got tobacco bars, I don't see. It's gonna fall under retail, but then it's gonna fall under liquor store. So if you're retail and you're a liquor store, you sell over 25% of your floor area to liquor, then these are the regulations you have to be. You have to be 500 feet away, but it's exempt in the downtown for a liquor store. If you're a bar, then it's just a conditional use permit, and I don't think we have specific regulations for those types of establishments. Because we've got that one, Whiskey Row was approved, and but I don't think we have anything when it comes to
And we approved the craft brewery
yeah,
with the church over there.
yeah. We went
All right,
through the.
So Sean, you think you've got your head wrapped around where we want to go with this?
Yeah, so I can remove the downtown overlay requirement. We'll use something similar to the alcohol sales. And then I can update the terms to really address, and if I can seek an answer from the council as to why it was brought up, then I can let you know. So to talk about hotels, I think this was brought up as kind of a response to the concern about the hotel project. I think what was missed a little bit was the fact that if we wanted to uphold the requirements for the block wall and those types of things, it pretty much makes the development difficult. So the variance had to be approved in order for that project to go anyways. So I think, personally, I think that what we have in place works. You know, the Best Western is adjacent to a residential zone. They're gonna build houses. There was planned development there even before the Best Western went in, just never went, because that was right during the, kind of the bubble in the market.
Yep.
So there's houses proposed there. It's set back quite a bit, and that has to do with the height setbacks that push the building out a little bit. So I think the way we have regulations set, I think that we've got enough. It just depends, if we want to further restrict, because if you want to restrict them from residential districts, those are probably the most sensitive receptors when it comes to the hotels, unless you want to do something different.
Well, then, what do we have here in town besides the Best Western? We've got,
The
Cambridge, you've got
down
the
here.
Kalinga Motel, they're all by residential areas.
right, you've got, and I don't know whether the Baker House would be included in that or not. Other than the consternation that came around about the RICO project, to your knowledge, have we had issues at any of our other places?
I'm not aware. I don't know. I don't know if PD gets a lot of calls for service, if there's any concerns or issues with those hotels.
Well, and they would be all grandfathered in regardless anyway,
None of them have
because
block walls. None of them have any of that.
they're existing.
Right,
Yep.
but, so why, I guess my thought is, what's the issue and why do we need to codify anything?
Yeah, I think it
I
may have
agree
come
with
from the previous project, but the process went through and it wasn't approved, and so
And he didn't appeal it either, correct, to the city?
no, there was no appeal.
So basically, the process worked.
So, I can always go back to the council and say, planning commission, and, upon discussion, recommends just enforcing the setback rules, and essentially a site has to work. If you're looking to change the use, the site has to work for a hotel based on current zoning regulations,
Yeah.
which would have enforced the block wall, which would have in turn made that project undevelopable because they would have lost all access to their parking access, everything. It would have, it's just basically stating that it's not conducive for development. And that's really where it comes down to, and I think for the most part, let me look here. I think hotels, motels require, use permits anyways. So the only place a hotel motel does not require is in the commercial retail center, which is basically the old Save Mart parking lot, the old Save Mart building, which you're not gonna see probably hotels or motels, you might, but if they wanna convert it. But everything else requires a conditional use permit, so it's always gonna come back through a special permit. It's gonna be, and typically that's our opportunity to really bring a development into compliance if it's a change in use. So we address those through conditions and to make them, adhere to the design standards for the city. And sometimes that will establish whether that site is conducive for development for that type of use, or it's, hey, this isn't gonna work.
Yeah, I think we have enough ordinances related to that. We don't need to add more.
Okay.
So do we have any department reports, Sean?
No.
Okay. Communications?
Do you have more?
No, I had a question about the Kmart, what's happening with the Kmart space?
Based on what Marissa put out at the last meeting, there's some talks.
It's in the newspaper, it's in today's newspaper.
I only get the paper once a month,
Okay,
so.
go
Yeah,
ahead, Sean. Sorry.
I'll pull up the information and then I can, I'll get you kind of what Marissa had, explained at the meeting. I can't remember exactly what she put out, but, there is more retail. There's a new developer that's looking at the site to develop it. Yeah.
So, Sean, what do you know, if anything, about the development occurring east of town, past the prisons on the north side of that lot up there?
I don't,
Come up on top of the hill and there's bulldozers out there.
I have no idea. Since it's in the county, I'm not aware of anything. I mean, I've seen the
Yeah.
earth movement and I've seen the fencing and stuff like that, but I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be.
All right, commissioners, any other comments or, okay, no communications. Our next meeting will be.
Should be the 25th. I will communicate if anything changes, but as far as I know, it should be the next meet. We should be having another meeting on the 25th. Then I'll bring back some updated language, and then if everything looks good,
So
we'll
you're
start.
pretty sure we're gonna go through with that one on the 25th?
Yeah, because I'll bring back some updated language, and then we can make it a quick meeting just to go through what we talked about, and then I'll even make it in a draft ordinance format, and then I'll do the public noticing and go through the hearing process.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know Jim's position expires, you said the 16th. What's the status on filling the position?
Applications were due, I think, what, today? The 6th? Okay, so we're going through those, and then it'll be on the agenda for April 20th
Okay,
for the council to appoint.
okay.
How many applicants did you receive, if you know?
I think 3.
30?
3.
I was gonna say, are you right, 30? Okay,
Christy has been in charge of those.
Yeah,
but
and
the
I-
ones that I am aware of, I believe 3.
Yeah, agenda items are due tomorrow, so we'll probably get them all finalized up tomorrow.
Okay.
okay, anything else?
I
We'll
don't have anything
adjourn.
else.